Hey Eagle fans, this is EaglefanKarl. This is going to be my prediction video for Sunday's game against the Denver Broncos. Start off, of course, by we want to give our congratulations to Carson Wentz on a fabulous October. He was recognized this week as the NFC Offensive Player of the Month, which was really no surprise given where he was and what he's done this year. One of the things I'm going to do during the bye week is, I'm going to take a look at where he is right now and what that could mean for possible season-ending numbers. But I'll save that for the bye week. I'm not going to worry about doing that this week. So we'll take a look at some of those figures. It's easy to do them now because all you have to do is double his stats since he's halfway through the season. And it really brought some interesting numbers up and some interesting things we can follow in the second half of the season. But that's a conversation for next week. Right now, I do want to take a look at the game and some of the things that sort of jump out at me when I look at the stats. And I know a lot has been reported about the Eagles' statistics and how well we are against the run and how horrible we are against the pass. But I was thinking about that this week, and I think those numbers are misleading for one major reason, and that is we have been leading in a lot of games. And as a result, teams have a tendency to pass when they're behind. So I really think that some of our running stats are probably a little better than what they really are, and our passing stats aren't as bad as what they seem. So I decided to take a look at another number, and it sort of confirmed what I thought. And when you hear a lot of the statistics that are thrown around out there about the Eagles defense, you'll hear that we're number 1 against the run, but 27th ranked against the pass. And that's what I'm talking about. Well, that's only talking about total yardage. So like I said, the yardage for passing is going to get inflated if all teams are doing is passing against you. And you look at some of the games we've had this year, we've had big leads against teams like Arizona, like the San Francisco 49ers. And some of those teams aren't that strong running the ball anyway. So when you factor all that in, I think it's really inflated the passing yards that have been against us. Instead, if you take a look at our yards per play, something very interesting starts to happen. And that is our numbers get much closer together in terms of where they are. In terms of running plays, we are 8th in the league in yards per play against the run. We're 12th in the league in passing yards per play. So while that means that we're not quite as good against the run as maybe the total yardage would suggest, it does suggest that in both categories, we're in the top half of the league. And I think this is a legitimate defense, and some of it's been yardage that we've been giving up when, we've just been trying to let the other team run out the clock. So when you've got passing plays that are going for some yardage against you late in a game, when you're just letting the team, move the ball, but not allowing them to really do anything with it, that's going to really change the amount of yards, and it really even changes a little bit the yards per play, but not quite as much. So if you really take a look at the Eagles defense as a whole, I think it really shows that, overall, it's probably better against the pass than you think, but we might not be quite as good against the run as you think. And if we have a team that absolutely sticks with running the ball against us, they might have some success. So just because a team is strong against the run doesn't necessarily mean that it should be an easy day for our defense. But that raises another issue, and really, what are you supposed to do in terms of judging offenses and defense by yardage? And sometimes I prefer to look instead at the other statistic that's probably the most important when it comes to who wins and loses games, and that's scoring. And this is really where it gets interesting as far as the Broncos are concerned, because they have some real discrepancies as it relates to their yardage versus their scoring, and neither one of them is a good trend for them. Specifically, on offense, they are 15th overall in offense, which says that they're about middle of the pack, but then when you look at their scoring, they're 24th in scoring. So it just shows that they're moving the ball, but they're not always scoring points when they do, or they're settling for field goals when they do. So right there, already, there's something out of whack as it relates to them. You look at our offense, and it's not that way. We're 6th overall in yardage for offense, and we're 4th in scoring. So right there, we're at the top in both categories, which tells you that we're moving the ball and we're being efficient with it, and we're actually a little bit better than other teams are with scoring when we are moving the ball. And I attribute a lot of that to the fact that our red zone has been a lot better this year, and Carson Wentz has really improved in the red zone. And I think that's why that number is the way it is, and why it just goes to show that our offensive numbers for scoring are even better than our overall yards. When you look at defense, though, it's sort of the same trend. And here's the thing about Denver. They are number 1 in the league as it relates to overall team defense in yardage. but they're 13th in scoring, so that's kind of average. So once again, they're giving up, when teams are moving the ball against them, they're giving up points. So I really think that that's sort of a goofy thing to keep an eye on, because sometimes I think yardage can be a little bit misleading when you're really looking at the way these teams end up, in terms of where they really are and how good their defenses are. Ours, once again, is pretty much right about where you'd expect it. If anything, it's a little bit better. We're 14th in overall defense, but we're 10th in scoring. So once again, our defense and scoring is probably a little bit better. And that's because, once again, I think we're allowing teams to move the ball late in the game when we've got big leads, but we're really not letting them score points out of it. So once again, I think that's another thing to sort of watch, is just because a team is giving up yards doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing, especially when you've got leads late in the game. Because the most important thing in those instances is letting the clock run, and that's been an area where, once again, the Eagles still are top in the league as it relates to time of possession. Denver is 4th in the league on time of possession, so that's going to be an interesting number to watch this week. But I think, once again, it goes to show that the Eagles are having leads at the end of games, and they're trying to run the clock out, and that's going to allow you to really have that time of possession be a lot higher. There's a couple of other stats I want to talk about in relation to their offense and our defense, and that is sacks. They have been giving up quite a few sacks this year. In fact, they are tied for 26th in the league right now in sacks, and the Eagles are 9th in the league in getting sacks. And you couple that with the fact that they are tied for 26. That's a raw number. They've given up 25 sacks this season. They've only played 7 games, whereas we are tied for 9th and we've played 8. So, right there, I think that it goes to show that their offense is giving up a lot of sacks, and their quarterbacks are taking a lot of sacks. And that's going to be an important thing as we look at this game. And in terms of my assessment of this game, I think that that's a huge issue in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback and bringing him down when you do. And finally, the other statistic that really jumps out at you when you compare these two teams is turnovers. Because there's a lot of things that you look at and you're like, you see the Denver statistics and you're like, this team should be better than it is. But then you look at turnovers and you go, okay, that's why they've struggled so far this year. That's why they have a losing record. And it really goes to show how much turnovers come into play in this thing. And that's because they're 31st in the league in turnover differential, and we are 6th in the league. So the Eagles are doing a lot better in protecting the ball and taking it away than Denver is. And that's going to be a huge thing for this game. If we can win the turnover battle, I don't see how we lose this game. And that's because, if you haven't heard, they've announced that Brock Osweiler is going to be starting this week in place of Trevor Siemian. And I think, once again, you've got Jim Schwartz going up against an inexperienced quarterback, a guy who's struggled. He had a little bit of success in Denver his first go-around, but ever since then, he has just not been a very good quarterback. And you put Jim Schwartz up against someone like that, and I think he can really have a heyday, because Brock Osweiler is not the most mobile quarterback in the world. We've been getting a great pass rush with just our 4 down linemen, and that's just a recipe for disaster when you've got a non-mobile quarterback. So really, if we limit our mistakes and are able to capitalize on theirs, once again, I don't see how we lose this game. This is one of those games that early on, when I did my preseason prediction, I had this pegged as a win, but I was concerned about it because, Denver does have a good defense, and it could potentially pose problems for us. But as you look at the way these two teams are playing right now, if we limit our mistakes, there's no reason we should lose this game. I know a lot of people also are talking about, well, this is a trap game. It's right before the bye. It's non-conference. You're coming off a stretch where you played real well. But how many trap games can a team have on its schedule? Because it seems like every other week we're turning around and this team supposedly is playing a trap game. This goes back to when we were playing, really you could even say that when we played the Giants, although a divisional game in that instance is hard to say it's a trap game early in the season like that. But, the Giants hadn't won yet, so a lot of people were saying that, the pressure was on them and it could sort of be a trap game for us. I didn't really buy that one as much as a trap game. But the Chargers game, I did buy as a trap game. In fact, I picked against the Eagles for that reason, and the Eagles ended up overcoming that. Arizona, to a degree, was a little bit of a trap game because people are like, well, they're gonna be overconfident going in against a team that's struggling right now, and so they might overlook them, especially with the Carolina game coming up. So that was a trap game. They responded on that one. Then it was the Monday night game against Washington. Like, well, they beat them already, so they might think that they're going to be able to just walk all over them again, so that's a trap game. Well, it turns out the Eagles, that wasn't a trap game for the Eagles. And then again last week, the San Francisco 49ers, oh, they stink. They haven't won a game yet this year. Obviously, it's a trap game. The Eagles are probably going to struggle. And they did for a little bit, but then they took care of business. So all in all, how many trap games does a team have to have? And that's one of the reasons why I said I really think this team is an elite team, because that's the way elite teams win. They don't always play their best football, but when they are supposed to beat a team, they beat that team. And that's the instance this week. If we are continuing to be an elite team, we should be able to win this game this week, and we should be able to beat this team. So for those reasons, I really like the Eagles in this situation. I'm going to go ahead, and my prediction is going to be Eagles 24, Broncos 10. I sort of have an interesting weekend coming up because every year there's an annual conference I go to that's always in the fall, and it happens to fall over this weekend, and it's going to really sort of mess up my Sunday. So while I'm going to be able to watch, the game's going to be broadcast in Atlanta where I'm going to be, but I'm probably only going to be able to watch the first half of it because of the fact I have a commitment then that I have to be at 3:30, so I'm going to probably miss at least a good portion of the second half, if not the whole second half. So I'm hoping maybe the Eagles have this thing wrapped up by halftime and I don't have to worry about it. But if you follow me on Twitter and suddenly I stop tweeting for the second half of the game, you'll know why. It's also going to make things a little difficult in doing sort of a reaction video. I'm going to have to really, go off of what other people are saying maybe. But that is something that I'll go ahead and I'll do a reaction video probably from down in Atlanta, and I'll give you some of my thoughts in terms of what happened in the game. Leave your comments below. Let me know what your prediction is for the game and what you think. Am I way off? Do you think the Eagles will fall into a trap here and will lose this game? Or do you think this is going to be a blowout and the Eagles aren't going to have any problems? Once again, I'm saying the Eagles are going to win by 2 touchdowns. So I think that's fairly comfortable, but it might be a little closer than that. So all in all, though, I think the Eagles do come away with a win this week. Like I said, I'll check in after the game and give you my thoughts. Until then, fly Eagles fly.